It's Wednesday night after a long day, and the last thing you want to do is cook dinner from scratch. But you still want a satisfying, tasty meal without the guilt? Enter your freezer's sidekick, Cauliflower. From thin and crispy cauliflower crust pizzas to all-natural white meat chicken tenders and more, Cauliflower is gluten-free always, satisfies every craving, and is ready in minutes. Cauliflower is available in freezer aisles nationwide. Visit eatcauliflower.com/where-to-buy to find a store near you.
You're listening to Missing Persons, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, DNA ID, Zodiac Speaking, Scene of the Crime,
Beyond Bizarre True Crime, Campus Killings,
and
Killer Communications.
All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not necessarily represent those of the podcast, its creators, or sponsors. This episode may contain unsettling or disturbing subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
If you'd like to support Missing Persons and get VIP access to things like ad-free listening, early preview episodes, and bonus content of not only this show, but for every other podcast on the AbJack network of indie podcast, consider subscribing to the show with an AbJack Insider subscription through Apple Podcast. For only $4.99 a month or $49.99 a year, you'll unlock a variety of listener benefits, and you'll be supporting the show in the process. Your support is greatly appreciated.
Welcome to Missing Persons, a podcast dedicated to spreading the word about people who have vanished under mysterious or unexplained circumstances and the family members who are looking for answers. I'm Jess Betancourt.
And I'm Mike Morford. Together, we created this podcast to help give a voice to people who continue to search for their missing loved ones. In some cases, even after decades have gone by. In each episode, you'll hear from Jess giving listeners the backstory and the basic facts of the disappearance.
Then Mike will speak with someone who's intimately connected to the missing person, and his guest will share their story with us. So sit back and enjoy this episode, and who knows, maybe you can help us find someone who's missing. 33-year-old Christopher Newton has not been seen since the summer of 2024. Chris was born on January 2, 1992, to mother Christine Moore. Chris grew up in Alberta, BC, Canada, and had a loving family with parents, grandparents, and 2 younger siblings. He was very accomplished in high school, learning fluent French through his immersion program and excelling in several sports including hockey and baseball. He gave up his hockey captainship to focus on his studies, but started to exhibit erratic and irrational behavior. He began leaving the home in the night and wandering for hours and possibly even hallucinating. His family suspected his behavior was drug-related, and even though Chris denied that, his mom saw to it that he received counseling at a drug treatment center in Edmonton. But it didn't help, and it turned out drugs weren't the problem at that time. Christopher was diagnosed with schizophrenia at age 17. Once his condition was being managed by medications, Chris successfully founded an arborist company and maintained his own apartment. But things went downhill. When he vanished, Chris had last been known to be living in a tent in Nelson, a choice that he insisted on even though his family wanted to provide him with housing. He moved there in 2019 and set up his encampment near the CP rail tracks. He didn't want anyone near his camp, but Chris seemed to love it in Nelson, enjoying walking around the lake and meeting people in the community. He made use of a local organization that helped him get on disability and provided resources, and he relied heavily on a shelter called Stepping Stones, which closed in late 2023. When he did not have access to or stopped taking his medication, Chris started self-medicating with crystal meth. He also began stealing cars. That began a cycle of arrests and short-term jail time, each time with Chris being released and returning to his camp. But while Chris was incarcerated at Okanagan Correctional Center in September of 2023, The city of Nelson and the railway officials removed all the camps near the railway, including Chris's. When he was eventually released on December 11th, he had nowhere to go. He started sleeping on Ward Street. On the night of the 23rd of December, Nelson police contacted him near the museum and told him to move along. There is a lot of conflicting information about when Chris was actually last seen. Police have dug up numerous possible sightings. It's known from Chris's bank records that on December 24th, 2023, he went into 2 different liquor stores and purchased some alcohol. He also visited the local co-op and got some energy drinks, and he took a cab to 2 Mile around 3 or 4 p.m. The taxi driver who transported him was identified, but recalled nothing about his rider. Chris was not believed to have had his prescription medication with him. There were additional sightings of Chris by local facilities and residents until about July of 2024. No one has seen him since then. Chris's family reported him missing when they realized that Chris had not phoned them around the Christmas holidays, 2023. They have done an incredible amount of work on their own to find Chris, including establishing social media sites, interviewing Nelson residents and facilities Chris frequented, posting and handing out flyers, organizing searches with search and rescue teams and canines, consulting psychics, and working with the police. Chris Newton is now 33 years old. He's 5'10", 159 pounds, with brown hair, dark brown eyes, and a skateboard tattoo on his left shoulder. Chris's mother, Christine Moore, sat down to talk with Mike Morford about her son's case. That conversation is coming up after a word from our sponsors.
It's Wednesday night after a long day, and the last thing you want to do is cook dinner from scratch. But you still want a satisfying, tasty meal without the guilt? Enter your freezer's sidekick, Cauliflower. From thin and crispy cauliflower crust pizzas to all-natural white meat chicken tenders and crowd-pleasing snacks, Cauliflower satisfies every craving. Cauliflower's products are your favorite comfort foods, but made better for you and gluten-free always. The best part? You don't have to sacrifice taste or time, so you can honor your cravings without compromising. Craving pizza? You can enjoy Cauliflower's delicious margarita pizza for only 370 calories for half the pizza. Looking for easy snacks that kids and adults alike will love? Cauliflower's baked, never fried pizza snacks are nostalgia reimagined and ready in 5 minutes. Cauliflower's products are available in freezer aisles nationwide. Visit eatcauliflower.com/where-to-buy to find a store near you.
Hi, Christine. I want to thank you for coming on Missing Persons to discuss your son Chris's case with us today.
Thank you for having me.
You've been a real champion for his case since he's been missing. I've, tried to follow online what you've been doing, and it's a lot. I know you've been on Reddit and different websites. You've been a guest on podcasts, obviously. You've been interviewed by news outlets and stuff like that. So you're really making an effort to sort of solve your own son's case. How frustrating has it been up to this point, going through all that and still not having answers as to where Chris is?
Where do I start? It's been incredibly frustrating. Nobody prepares you for a loved one to go missing. So right on the onset, I didn't know what to expect. Nobody outlined anything and said A, B, C, D. These are the things that are going to happen. Instead, I felt like I was having to push and advocate to say, you know what, we need to get a dog search out. We need to, get out a search and rescue team, things like that. I felt right from the onset that things were delayed. And so from that perspective, it's been incredibly frustrating. I do have to say by our Facebook platform, I do a lot of writing, and through that, I feel that's been more, I guess, what has brought people forward to say, you know what, hey, let us help you in search. Let us hand out posters. What can we do to help? And if we wouldn't have done that and really pushed for presence on Facebook, I'm not even sure if we would have gotten much exposure.
Yeah, it's a good point there. You mentioned there's sort of no playbook for what to do when a loved one goes missing. I hear that from a lot of people. And we're going to get into the details surrounding his actual disappearance.
Yeah.
But before we do that, can we back up a little bit? Can you tell us a little bit about Chris and his life leading up to before he went missing?
Yeah. So Christopher's always been incredibly adventurous right from the time that he was little. Outdoors, nature, trees, all that sort of thing was really a big thing for him. We lived on a farm in Saskatchewan where he had two dogs and a cat that pretty much followed him everywhere, and has always enjoyed the outdoors. In high school, incredibly academic, took French immersion. So he is bilingual and also played hockey, was the captain of his hockey team for 2 years, his last 2 years of hockey, and also was a sponsored skateboarder. And then he really took a liking, like I had mentioned before, where he just was really into nature and just everything that it had to offer. He chose a career to become an arborist. And so with that, he did that a couple of years, kind of working underneath someone, and then started his own business. Became very successful in running his arborist business. But then we started to see some changes happen with him. My mom was incredibly sick. She was living with us, um, terminally ill with cancer. Christopher was incredibly close with his grandma. And that's when we really started to see some pattern changes with him. And then when she passed away, things kind of went off the rails for him a little bit. And the first time I noticed anything really significant is when we got a call from him, my husband and I, basically saying that he carried the cross of Jesus across a field. It was incredibly heavy. He sent us videos of his hands and said, "Mom, can you see the nail holes in my hands?" And he was really scared. And of course, I couldn't see or understand what he was talking about. My immediate reaction was that he was on drugs. And from there, more patterns started to creep up. My husband and I got him an apartment. He lived in the apartment for a little while and then left that apartment and chose to live outdoors. Um, as I started to learn about schizophrenia, and when I found out that he was actually diagnosed with schizophrenia, that's when I started to look back and say, okay, all of these things now make sense. Not being confined to four walls, wanting to be outdoors, some of the hallucinations that were happening. And his hallucinations were very biblical in nature. And so, it made sense after the fact. But at the time, not unfortunately, there's no playbook for parents, right? That everybody, it's such a big thing out there. Everybody's all, well, it's got to be drugs. It's got to be this. And, I went to counseling and, it was like set boundaries. He's using drugs. I asked him, he said, "No, Mom, I'm not. I am smoking marijuana." He was quite upset with us, and he was saying that his mind just wasn't like ours. So he did agree to go into a breakout program through the Herb Jameson Hope Mission, I think it was through. And it was based on drug addiction and then being able to go, integrate back into society, get yourself a job, do all of those sorts of things. And he was in it for probably about a month, just over a month, when he was saying, "Hey, Mom, like, it's really loud in here. I don't like the people. This isn't making sense." And eventually he took off. Um, and so that was really the starting point of a change for Christopher.
Now, was he on any medication? Did that help at all?
Not at that time. So one of the things that is very difficult here in Canada, each province is different, but there are privacy laws. So in Alberta, once your child turns 18, they now advocate for themselves. So unless they're willing to bring you to their doctor's appointments and say, "You know what, my mom or my dad or my sister or brother can listen and advocate for me, you're shut out completely. And so I was dealing with a lot of that as well. Trying to get answers, even calling, different organizations, different rehab facilities. And, they were like, well, unless he calls us, unless he tells us he's got a problem, unless he wants to do this, sorry, you can't do anything. Um, there's a lot of barriers and a lot of things that shut us out as a family.
It's got to be a helpless feeling not being able to step in and
Was.
help somebody that
Yeah.
needs help. And so, the issues seem like they're not really a drug issue yet he was
Not yet.
trying to get help for, a drug related type program or treatment, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Now you had mentioned his grandmother
Mhm.
was dying, that, maybe helped speed this along, this development of the signs that you saw. But I also read that his business started to suffer.
Yeah.
Was that another catalyst that you think brought him to a bad point?
Yes. So, he felt like Alberta, with our weather here, moving to BC was probably better because he'd have more opportunity. It's, longer seasons, where he'd be able to do the work for a lot longer. So that's what brought him to BC. And then, things really started to spiral for him. And from there, that's when, the real drug addiction started as well. And he was very open with us. He told us he was using by that time, and said that, he did it to calm his mind, which is a very frightening thing as a parent. But again, I would say to him, well, you shouldn't be doing that. And that would push him away. So then I, kind of, in order to keep him from not talking to us, I would advise, hey, it's not a good idea for you to be doing this. But he always said he was never a heavy user. He did it to calm his mind. It made him feel better, and things like that. But it really started to spiral once he was in BC.
Mm. And how long a stretch was he battling, that addiction with the drugs?
Well, I think the drugs started. So I can't pinpoint exactly when he started using heavy drugs. But I'm going to say it was probably before he went to BC. And then when things started to really unravel, where he became unhoused and things like that was in BC. Um, I can't tell you exactly when he really started to use the heavy drugs, but when he was very transparent with us was when he was in BC.
Now, you mentioned he's living sort of outside.
Hmm.
How did he keep in touch with you? Did you talk to him periodically, or certain increments? How did you stay in touch during that time?
Yeah, sure. So up until 2022, he had a cell phone. And so he would call me on a cell phone, and we'd FaceTime. And, he'd walk around the lake in Nelson with us. He'd show us his camp. He seemed really happy. And, you know, he's always chosen, as I mentioned before, when we got him an apartment, he still chose to live outside. So I although I didn't like that at all, at least I felt like he was in a better situation, in Nelson, BC, where the weather isn't as rough as it is here in Edmonton. And so, yes, so he up until 2022, he would use his cell phone. He would call quite often. Then in 2022, he decided that he no longer wanted a cell phone, and he stopped using social media. Um, and, he just felt like I can't remember his exact words, but more like it was like he didn't need technology. God would provide. He didn't need those sorts of things. So then the communication started happening, at Stepping Stones. So Stepping Stones is a shelter in Nelson, BC that had a drop-in center. So he would call me from the drop-in center. Usually it was in the morning. He'd come in there to have tea or coffee and a cereal or something and have long conversations with me. They were really good there because they didn't have a time limit for him to be on the phone. So sometimes we could talk for a very long time. And then if I didn't hear from him for a while, then I would call Stepping Stone. They could never, again, privacy laws, they could never say that oh yeah, he's around or whatever. What they would say to me is, yeah, we can just leave a message, and usually within a couple of days he'd call. So he would go long periods of time without calling. When he had a cell phone, at least I could see that he read them, because it has that read receipt on it. But once he got rid of his cell phone, then that was really tough. And then, eventually he stopped calling altogether.
Now, did you have a way to still check on him? I know you mentioned calling that place to see if they could give you any updates, but I mean, was it sort of a way for you to know that, okay, I'm not talking to him on a regular basis, but I know where he's at?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I felt comfort with that because I would call and they never gave me an indication because Nelson is a small town. It's like, I think 11,900, or approximately. And I never got the indication from the person on the other end of the phone that there was anything to worry about. Even in September of 2024, when I called the shelter, there was no indication that there was anything to worry about. I didn't hear a different tone in somebody's voice. And, maybe that was me by being naive, thinking I would get a different tone or a different response.
It's Wednesday night after a long day, and the last thing you want to do is cook dinner from scratch. But you still want a satisfying, tasty meal without the guilt? Enter your freezer's sidekick, Cauliflower. From thin and crispy cauliflower crust pizzas to all-natural white meat chicken tenders and crowd-pleasing snacks, Cauliflower satisfies every craving. Cauliflower's products are your favorite comfort foods, but made better for you and gluten-free always. The best part? You don't have to sacrifice taste or time, so you can honor your cravings without compromising. Craving pizza? You can enjoy Cauliflower's delicious margarita pizza for only 370 calories for half the pizza. Looking for easy snacks that kids and adults alike will love? Cauliflower's baked, never fried pizza snacks are nostalgia reimagined and ready in 5 minutes. Cauliflower's products are available in freezer aisles nationwide. Visit eatcauliflower.com/where-to-buy to find a store near you.
So you just brought up December 2023, and that's when, Chris was last seen at a gas station in the town of Nelson. Can you tell us about that last sighting and what was going on, what was reported, and what happened around that time?
Sure. Okay. So December 10th, approximately December 10th, 2023, Christopher was released from the Okanagan Correctional Center. And so part of Christopher's, what Christopher would do is he would take cars and he wouldn't do it maliciously. And how he would describe it to me is, you know what, Mom, I don't know why I did it. I just felt like I needed to drive like fast and furious is the way that he would say that. So 2 times he actually was put in jail for the same thing. The first time it happened, he was in for a couple of months. Then when he did it again, there was a time there, and this is when I actually found out that he was diagnosed clinically with schizophrenia, not drug-induced schizophrenia, but clinically diagnosed with schizophrenia was when the lawyers and the judge had said that he needed an evaluation. And when that evaluation was done, a psychiatrist phoned me. I talked to that psychiatrist, I think 3 times on the phone where, they wanted to know about Christopher's family life, his history. That's at the time when he said Christopher is a diagnosed schizophrenic. We do believe that he carries a gene. We think that the trigger or the onset of his schizophrenia was the passing of your mom, so his grandma, and that the gene laid dormant, and this is what caused it to accelerate. At that point in time, the psychiatrist had said to me, you know what, we're going to try our best to make sure that he gets proper care instead of being thrown in jail. And so this was the second time. And instead, that didn't happen. And he went back to jail. And so he went into jail September of 2023. My husband and I spoke to him December 10th of 2023. He sounded fantastic. He was receiving his oral medication at the time while he was in, was excited to get back to Nelson. He explained to us that he was going to be driven by the sheriff into Nelson because Okanagan Correctional Facility is a couple of hours away from Nelson, that they were bringing him into Nelson and that, he'd be released and everything would be great. So Christopher had been receiving, I don't know the right terminology, but prior to that, he was receiving, I think it's called a depot shot. So it was a needle that he would get once a month for his schizophrenia. When he was released that day at the courthouse, he was released without his medication. He was released without proper clothing for the winter months coming. And his camp, while he was in OCC, had been destroyed. And because Christopher was a creature of habit, and because schizophrenia for him, he would get paranoid. He felt safe in his own little place. He didn't stay in large encampments. That would have thrown him for an absolute loop. The stepping stones, I had talked about their drop-in center. That drop-in center had also closed. So he didn't have access to be able to call me. And so he went missing shortly after that. Now, there's been some discrepancy on where he actually was last sighted. So it started off with the Shell station, then it was Walmart, and then it was a co-op gas station. And then it's now 2 Mile, which is 2 miles outside of Nelson, near a point called Lions Bluff Trail. It's a trailhead. So at this point in time, it's just moved all over the place, right? So originally we thought it was a Shell gas station, but the police, as they continued to investigate, were like, oh no, it's this and this and this. And so, again, that's been a bit frustrating for our family.
Was the date always the same though? The last time
Yes,
we was seen it was
December 24th,
okay.
2023. Yes. Now, on top of that, though, there have been many people that have said that they saw Christopher in Nelson up until, July, August of 2024. And so there's been people that knew him quite well that said, oh no, we saw him here, we saw him there, he came to this place for breakfast. The Hub, which is a place that he would frequent as well, they closed their services at the end of March of 2024. However, they also said that he was coming in right up until they closed. When we talked to Street Outreach, they thought, they had seen him in 2024 as well. But the police, of course, are saying, you know what, it's based on, his last known transaction, so to speak. So there's a lot of difference of opinion. And as a family, it's been very frustrating for us because when was it? When did he go missing? The last time we heard from him was December 10th of 2023. Like I mentioned before, it was not unusual for him to go long periods of time without phoning. When I called Stepping Stone, I had no reason to believe that he wasn't around. We waited till Christmas because it was a pattern for him to always, no matter where he was, what he was doing, always called us around Christmas or his birthday. Christmas 2024 came. He didn't call. January 2nd, his birthday, he didn't call. That same day, I called Street Outreach. Their office was closed. I left a message. The next day, I talked to Street Outreach, who then said, you know what, we have not seen him since August. And so I immediately called the Nelson police and put in a missing report.
So, and just backing up to that date, so he was officially reported missing January 4th. Is that correct?
That's when they did the release date,
Okay,
January
okay.
4th. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I had reported him, but by the time the release went out, I believe it was January 4th, 2025.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when did you, now you had talked a little bit about him not always being in touch with you, but sort of
That's
being
right.
able to know where he's at, even if you couldn't talk to him directly. At what point did you start to get nervous and say, something's wrong here? We need to start looking for him.
So it was the Christmas, because he's never missed a Christmas of not phoning. And, you know, that Christmas, his birthday, always phones, and it's never exactly on Christmas. It's not December 25th that he calls or January 2nd that he calls. It's in and around that time. And that was unusual. So, that's when I really started to panic.
So you go to the police, you report him missing. What did
Yeah.
the police say early on? What was their initial thought process? What did they tell you they thought may be going on?
We didn't know anything about, people don't know what happens, and what happens. You report somebody missing, you're panicked as a family. There was no textbook, as I mentioned before. So nobody actually sat us down and said, this is what we're going to do. This is the process for our missing persons policy. We did ask for the missing persons policy from the Nelson police. They then referred us to the BC, link. Nobody sat down with us and actually told us how this was going to go. So my husband and I actually drove to Nelson, and we walked around the town of Nelson and started talking to people ourselves, talking to the unhoused population, talking to different services that he would frequent. And we just started posting stories on Facebook. We set up a missing persons page. At that point in time in Nelson, the weather, I felt, and of course, I am not an expert on search and rescue, but it had not snowed in Nelson yet. And so I was like, we've got to get dogs out. We've got to figure out, where is he? If he did wander off, like you had said to me 4 days into the search, then we need to get out there and look for him. Right. And so that was delayed. We had actually requested that drones go out, and that was delayed. Originally, we were told, the drones, we could get our own drones. We did have to have a police officer removed. That was on the file for 2 months. And then a lead investigator had to go back and interview the people that I had talked about before. And so I feel like we lost a couple of months of search time there as well. And then they did finally get in Nelson Search and Rescue and drones in. And I believe that was mid-March. And then just recently, they got in one dog and a sergeant, I believe it was from the RCMP, that did a 2-day search in areas they thought were of interest. My family, we did travel out to Nelson, but we were not part of that search. They just gave us an update and said, this is where we went, and nothing was found. I think that more should have been done. I think one dog in the Kootenays in that area is not enough to search all of the bush in that area and the trees. It's very, very, very dense. Then after that, then they got in a psychic intuitive that was out there for 4 days. So one dog was only out there for 2 days, but the psychic intuitive guy was there for 4.
Hmm.
So
Kind of something that seems unusual. And just for the benefit of listeners, now you describe this area as bushy. Is
Yeah.
it like mountainy type or
Yes.
hills? And is there like creeks or rivers there?
Yeah. So it's in the Kootenay Mountains. Nelson, BC is in the Kootenays. There's Kootenay Lake there, which is a very large lake. And so, yeah, it's surrounded by mountains, and those mountains are not like the Rocky Mountains. They are, there's probably a technical term for this or a right term, but they're the mountains that have all of the big, like pine trees across them, right? So very, very dense in terms of trees in that area.
So, and Chris is presumably his camp's been taken away, so he doesn't have any of his
Right.
stuff. He's
Correct.
presumably in this area with the clothes on his back. Is that what we're thinking?
That's what we're thinking. And when he was released from OCC, as I mentioned earlier, and was brought to Nelson, so it was December 11th. Of course, it's not the same temperatures as what we have here in Alberta, but still cold considering what he had. So he was wearing a light black jacket, a gray t-shirt, black pants, black running shoes, and a gray toque. That is not good winter weather, it's just not good for winter. And like I said, his camp was taken down. And so anything that he had that was familiar, um, and don't get me wrong, like, I'm assuming that his camp would have at times gotten ransacked by people, but the outreach workers, etc., they would go into his camp. And we actually spoke to some people where they would actually go in and take some of his things and make sure that they were kept safe. And this time, the camp was torn down without them even being able to go get anything that mattered to him. And one of the things that really mattered to him were his Pokemon cards. It was a way that he felt God was talking to him. As I mentioned before, became very biblical, and he just tried to solve messages he felt that were coming through these cards from God. So even when I would sit on the phone with him when he still had a cell phone, some of our conversations, he would just quote Bible verses to me and, talk about trying to find these messages within these cards. And we
Uh,
do know he was in psychosis because he was released without any medication. When we look at his bank records, very shortly after being released, started buying Pokemon cards, and not just one package, several.
So he's going to, I'm assuming he's buying these cards because it puts him at ease, but it
Yeah.
still doesn't help him with the elements that he's going to be facing.
That's right.
What did the snow and the winter wind up being that season? How bad was it?
So I don't live there. We live in Sherwood Park, which is just outside of Edmonton, which is where Christopher grew up after we moved from Saskatchewan. But my understanding is the winters can get cold with snow. And, so that's our concern. What happened? It's like he just vanished.
It's Wednesday night after a long day, and the last thing you want to do is cook dinner from scratch. But you still want a satisfying, tasty meal without the guilt? Enter your freezer's sidekick, Cauliflower. From thin and crispy cauliflower crust pizzas to all-natural white meat chicken tenders and crowd-pleasing snacks, Cauliflower satisfies every craving. Cauliflower's products are your favorite comfort foods, but made better for you and gluten-free always. The best part? You don't have to sacrifice taste or time, so you can honor your cravings without compromising. Craving pizza? You can enjoy Cauliflower's delicious margarita pizza for only 370 calories for half the pizza. Looking for easy snacks that kids and adults alike will love? Cauliflower's baked, never fried pizza snacks are nostalgia reimagined and ready in 5 minutes. Cauliflower's products are available in freezer aisles nationwide. Visit eatcauliflower.com/where-to-buy to find a store near you.
It is a pretty big area without being fully properly searched by
Yeah.
using a variety of people and dogs and drones and all that stuff. For the most part, you said some searching had been done, but it sounds like a pretty big area that, unless you're doing a very thorough search, you
Right.
could miss a sign of him out there.
And that's my concern. My concern is that, it's a pretty, like you said, a very big area. I understand that, they've pinpointed certain areas that they did search, but I feel like it almost needs to be expanded beyond that. Um, because who knows? If you're just one guy and a dog and a police officer and I'm not discounting the work that the gentleman did with the dog. I mean, he worked hard for sure.
Mm.
But that doesn't cover a lot of area, in my opinion, and especially with the density of the bush, that I really felt that it should have been more expanded.
Sure, that's what it sounds like to me. And just to be hopeful, there's these possible sightings of him
Mhm.
later in the warm summer months. Ha-
Yes.
Are any of them reliable? And to say that maybe he went someplace and was okay and was still okay in the summer when people supposedly saw him?
Um, Definitely the restaurant that he used to frequent that gave free breakfasts. I mean, I believe that she's incredibly reliable. Like I mentioned, the hub, who knew him very well, that said that he was there until like they closed down. I would say they're very reliable as well because, they knew Christopher very well. Street Outreach also knew Christopher well. So I wouldn't discount those. But at the same time, when you don't have anything that, you know, can say, oh, here's a picture of him or here he is on CCTV footage, that's been a bit of the difficulty around this. We have had people, so let me back up a bit. When we were in Nelson, we talked to some people that actually knew Christopher quite well, that are in the unhoused community. And one guy, a good friend of his, I felt, had said, we had said that there have been potential sightings. We don't have anything on footage, but there have been potential sightings of a person resembling Christopher in Victoria. He said, if anybody can survive the elements and knows how to live outdoors, it's Christopher. So I wouldn't, he said, I wouldn't discount the fact that he was able to make it to Victoria because he's incredibly resourceful. Because when I looked at the map from where Nelson is to Victoria, I'm like, how would he even get there? But apparently he was quite resourceful, and there's a lot of people, I guess, in the unhoused community that can, travel and hitchhike and do those sorts of things that, somebody like you or I don't think of, right?
So does that give you hope that he could
Mhm.
be out there and okay someplace and just maybe doesn't know who he is or how to get home?
That's what I'm really hoping. I have been told that, from other parents, other people that have, been involved working in different, I guess, shelters and things that, it is possible. People have gone missing for 2 or 3 years. They find them, they don't know their name, can't remember their, family's phone numbers, things like that. I'm really hoping that that's the situation that, because he is unmedicated, right? And I don't know what would happen to him being unmedicated for that long.
So, he's been out there without medication, without anything that we
So
know of,
long.
belongings, any of that stuff this whole time. Have there been any additional possible sightings of him more recently?
Actually, one today in the same area of Victoria. that has been previously reported before. There is an amazing street outreach group in Victoria that have been absolutely fantastic. They've actually said that they had him signing into warming beds in November and December of 2024. And, outreach workers seeing him up until March. And then we've had other people call in and say, as recent as today, saying, you know what, I think I saw him in the Topaz Park area, which is where other people have called and said, I think I saw him in that same vicinity. So there's someone, whether it's Christopher or not, I'm learning through this process that I have to stay calm and be very realistic because there's so many highs and lows, right? When he first went missing and we got calls right away, I would go, "Oh my gosh, we found him," and get really excited and then find out it wasn't him. But in this situation, you know, people have gone out right away afterwards and looked around and they can't find anybody. Like, not just a person that looks like Christopher, but there doesn't seem to be anybody around in that area. So, as recent as today on our missing person page, we did put a call out to people to say, anybody in the area of Topaz Park in Victoria, if they could go out and put up posters. And so, what we've done with the posters is we've gotten rid of it looking like a police poster. Because what we were told, both by unhoused people as well as outreach workers, is a lot of times when you have a missing person poster and it's got police information and call the police, people are reluctant to do that. So we did change our posters where it just has a picture of him and it says, missing person, Chris Newton, please call home, love, mom. And then it has a QR code on it where people can use the QR code, which will then take them to our Facebook page, which gives more information. So it's less threatening. Because I would feel too, and never thought about this until an outreach worker brought this up, that if he's living in a different state and he's, state of mind, and he sees something that says, missing person, call Nelson, please, he may think he's in trouble. And not and try to avoid those areas. So that's why we changed our posters.
That makes a lot of sense. I never thought about that like that.
Right?
And the so there are possible leads still coming in. Are the police still actively looking into these different
Yes.
sightings? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. Yeah. And, with the Nelson Police Department being so small, short some resources, we have encouraged people to call directly to their local police department. And then from there, they'll link to the Nelson City Police file, because there are times when the Nelson City Police are busy. And so it's easier if they just call the local police, or if they want to remain anonymous, of course, they can call Crime Stoppers.
Okay. And is there a reward being offered in the case currently?
Not right now.
Okay.
No.
And I know a lot of the work you've done, you've mentioned a few times, Facebook. I know you've been on Reddit. I've seen several different places where you were. Where are some of the places, if you want to maybe give the links out, and we'll include them in the show notes when we publish. But if you want to give them out on the air, are there any certain best sites that people can go to learn more about the
Yes.
case or leave information?
Yeah. So the best place to go is our Facebook page, which is missing person space Chris Newton. And there's a lot of information on there. That's where you can get posters. You can also send messages. Christopher's stepsister Shelby runs that page, and she's very responsive to people if they want to send a message. She'll be the one that's responding to that. If somebody wants posters, she'll make sure that posters get out. If people have any other questions, she certainly can answer those as well. We also have a Gmail if somebody would like to do that. So our email is searching for Chris Newton at gmail.com.
And hopefully out there are people listening that might have some information, whether maybe they saw him or heard something, they can, reach out to you and share that information. Along those lines, with everything you're doing, with all the social media, with the appearances, being interviewed, being on podcast, all of that, what still would you like to see done? Maybe that through lack of resources or just for whatever reason hasn't been able to be done in this case. What do you think can be done?
I'd like to see, an expanded search area done. To rule out that, he truly has left the Kootenays. Um, I'd like things to be acted upon a lot quicker than they are, because I think timing really matters, especially when you're dealing with somebody in a vulnerable situation where, they're living unhoused. They have a mental illness, and he's got an addiction. So, with our drug supply out there, my gosh, all it takes, he could be here today or right now and gone in 2 minutes. That's how quick things need to be acted upon. And I really find that there's a lot of delays, and in communication. So I think it needs to be taken more seriously. I also think that if we were allowed, there weren't the privacy laws, and we were allowed to advocate for him in a situation, especially when he was in psychosis, and be able to be there to make sure that he was released with proper care and support on the, as he was released, be involved right from the onset with his psychiatrists, etc., that he wouldn't be missing today. So I think there's a lot of failure in our system. And so, even in that, I believe the system failed him. People will often say, well, where were you as parents? Well, when you're shut out of the system, you have no choice but to rely on it.
That's a good point. And, I'm thinking that there's probably going to be somebody listening that's maybe in your shoes. Maybe they're looking for their son or their brother.
Yeah.
Or what advice from your experience here might you share with somebody else that maybe just started going through this process? What can you offer to try and help somebody else?
Um, I think that you have to be the advocate of your child. You cannot just rely on the process of the policing. You need to push, because nobody is going to, or nobody loves your child like you do. And you need to be that voice to say, have you checked here? And stay involved. Also, nobody told me what was going to happen in terms of myself and my family. Um, I mean, we had breakfast on a Sunday morning, and decided that we were going to watch TV in the afternoon, and um, I suddenly couldn't see, I couldn't breathe. Um, I thought I was dying. I felt, if my body felt like it was falling. Um, I didn't think I was thinking about anything. And so my husband had to call an ambulance. And of course, they were fantastic. And they told me I was having a panic attack. Nobody prepares you for those things. Nobody tells you you have to, that this is going to happen, or you're suddenly going to be losing sleep, or it's going to become obsessive thoughts because you're so out of control in a situation like this because you're relying on, the police to follow through with the investigation, to make sure that they're staying on top of things. It's getting your son or daughter or loved one's name out there so that people are not just looking at it as, oh, there's another missing poster. People really need to look behind that missing poster and know that they have a story. Everybody has a story. Nobody chooses, if they're in a situation like Christopher's where he was in a vulnerable spot, nobody chooses that life. And so you've got to be able to tell the story behind that person so people aren't just scrolling and saying, oh, there's just another one. Because they're not just another one. These are people.
Yeah.
And
That's fair.
they deserve to be found.
Yeah, that's very good advice too. And to take care of yourself while you're looking for them.
That's right.
In your case, you had some ill effects from it, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of people forget about that you can become so consumed with finding somebody else that you forget that you need help too, and to take care of yourself.
Yeah, that's right. Self-care is really important, and it's tough because, and I've talked to other parents about this, you carry the heavy guilt and you feel like, my son or daughter or loved one is out there and, what if they're not eating or what if they're in a situation or they don't have a roof over their head or whatever the situation is. So anytime you do an action like that, it creates this reactive feeling of guilt. And before you know it, that cycles, you end up in a panic attack, right? Or you end up with health issues. And so self care is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, from everything you've said and from everything I've read, it seems like you're not stopping and you're really, as you said, your son's best advocate.
Yeah.
So keep up the faith and keep doing that work and putting in that effort, and we'll help, share
Thank you.
the word about your son's case and let people know that it's still unsolved, he's still missing, and maybe we can help spread the word for you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Missing Persons. If you can provide any information to help solve the case we discussed in this episode, please contact the appropriate authorities.
If you enjoy this podcast, please take a moment to tell your friends about Missing Persons and invite them to listen to the show. Word of mouth will help us grow and bring these cases to a larger audience. You can also help us by taking a moment to rate and review Missing Persons on the platform you're listening to us now on. If you want to get early and ad-free access to new episodes of Missing Persons and help support the show in the process, please consider a subscription to our Apple Podcast. For only $4.99 a month or $49.99 a year, you'll get early ad-free access to not only this show, but to every other show on the AbJack network of podcasts. You can get started with a free trial by searching for AbJack Entertainment in your Apple app, and we'll include a link in the show notes. If you want to find us on social media, we're on every major platform and on YouTube. Just search for Missing Persons Podcast. We'll include links to all of our social media in our show notes, and you can also visit our website, missingpersonspodcast.com. Finally, if you're in need of a platform to discuss a missing persons case that you're connected to, feel free to reach out to us on our website. We're happy to help. Just a reminder that new episodes of Missing Persons air every other Saturday. On behalf of Jess Betancourt, this is Mike Morford saying thanks, and we'll see you next time on Missing Persons.